Okay, good morning, Dad. Today is Monday, December 2nd, and I want to start off by talking about Syria again because after our last conversation on Friday, you dumped a lot of knowledge on me, but I ended up thinking over the weekend and I still have more questions now than I did before. So, just to start with, who planned and coordinated this conflict in Syria? Is this organic or how did this even come about? Because to me it's very suspicious that this happened 24 hours after a ceasefire was reached between Israel and Lebanon. So just we'll start there. How did this start? How did this happen?
Okay, well, I think there's no question that Turkey is the main mover behind this. Turkey is the one who's organized. It is not the only funder or the only party involved in this. I think it's highly likely, it's almost certain that the U.S. is involved. They have been in the past, and that Israel is involved to some extent. Um, but Turkey is, Turkey. Some of these are even. I think one of the armies is known as a Turkish militia. You know, uh, they even most of the foreign fighters there came in through Turkey. Turkey, in fact, put them there. That for example, these people from Xinjiang, the Uyghurs, uh, came to Turkey at Turkey's invitation way back in the early 2010s. And when they came to Turkey, Turkey moved them on into Syrian territory. So that, yeah, we have to, there's no question that Turkey is the main instigator.
No, no question.
Yeah,
You're sure.
I don't think there's any question about it.
But I don't know. I'm just not fully satisfied with the answer you gave on why Turkey would want to do this. You said it stemmed largely from the Shia Sunni divide, but from
Okay, yeah, that's not. I don't think that actually is correct. I probably overemphasized that. That's when you look at the conflict that took place beginning in 2011. Maybe I'll go over that very quickly. It was 2011's. That was the Arab Spring that started in North Africa. I think it was Algeria, where there was a street peddler, who set himself on fire to protest um, the treatment he had received at the hands of the authorities there. And that led to protests, and those protests spread from country to country throughout the Arab world. And one of the places where it happened was Syria. And so the initial protests, I think, were organic, but very quickly outside parties moved in. One of the things that happened immediately was that a lot of these Sunni Arab countries, who had really, had it in for Assad, who had never liked him because, again, he's not part of this so much of the Sunni Arab world. He's an Alawite. Well, his regime is secular, but he and his family that rule the country are Alawites, who are an offshoot of Shia. And back then, the Sunni Shia um, um, divide was quite serious. There's more than a divide. There's real hostility, and so immediately Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, all these Sunni powers began pouring in arms and money to support rebels, and began training not the original protesters, but jihadists. And then in the north, Turkey intervened and saw an opportunity and began to, they had their own jihadists, and more than that, even the Turkish army moved in, and there are elements of the Turkish army still there in the northwestern part of Syria. So initially there was a great part of it as the Sunni Shia divide, but I think actually looking at it now, that's secondary. Yes, Turkey is a Sunni country, um, and but I don't think that's what's motivating. On reflection, that's not really what's motivating Erdogan. Erdogan has his own objectives. He's interested in his own power and the power of Turkey, and he wants to extend it. And I think he simply is after territory and influence within Syria. I think those are his main motivations. Now, the U.S. and Israel are quite interested, of course, in just weakening Hezbollah. They understand how Syria is a crucial link within the axis of resistance. Again, Hezbollah's support it depends on Syria. Syria itself supplies weapons and other things to Hezbollah. And it's also a conduit for supplies that come in from like Iran and Iraq. And if that link is severed, if the Assad government should be overthrown, Hezbollah will be isolated and will be severely damaged. Israel understands that, and that's one reason they have constantly been attacking Syria. They're doing whatever they can to weaken Syria. So I'm sure, if they could provide support for this, they most certainly did. At the very least, they're cheering it on, and they see it as a wonderful opportunity. Now, remember too, like what I mentioned that photograph of these fighters, the ones that just took Aleppo, holding up a sign written in Hebrew thanking Netanyahu for assassinating Nasrallah. Now they understand that Israel is on their side, but that's not really. I don't think that is. I'm sure, in fact, on reflection, that is not Erdogan's motivation. It's just what it comes down to with Erdogan is that he just cares about himself. He doesn't give it. He talks about the Palestinians. He talks a good game because he understands how important that is to his people. So he gives these fiery speeches. He broke diplomatic relations, right, with the oil flows. It's all symbolic. He just doesn't give a damn about them. He doesn't. So objectively, this offensive that is largely is supported by and was organized by Turkey to a very, very great extent. Again, I think there probably was quite a bit of American involvement, but objectively it harms Hezbollah. It harms the Palestinian cause, but he just doesn't care.
So do you think he was just a opportunistic move for Erdogan? I mean, it's hard. I mean, just because Hamas, the Palestinians, they are Sunni, right? The Turkish are also Sunni, right. But we have seen it's the Shiites or offshoots of Shiites that have been really the ones that have been standing up for the Palestinians. So it's just odd to me that Turkey would make a move like this when it's damaging their Sunni brothers in Palestine.
Yeah,
right. Well, I don't understand.
Obviously, Erdogan does not care. It's been clear. I've been saying that before this happened. Obviously, he just doesn't give a damn about that. He's always been giving these speeches, but he just doesn't give a damn. He actually works closely with Israel in a lot of different places, and that's true of some other Sunni states. I think Qatar is another example. Now, and it used to be true to a great extent of Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, but they have moved away. They made peace with the Shia, and they have moved away from Israel. Not entirely, but it's clear that like they're moving away from the U.S.-Israel axis towards the BRICS. They're making that shift. They still keep at one foot in the U.S. camp, but I think actually Erdogan, in a way, he's always been completely consistent in his inconsistency. I mean, it's just that everybody really knows who Erdogan is. That he's always going to jump back and forth, and always when he sees an opportunity on one side, he leaps over there another. He makes a promise and then stabs somebody in the back. And it's just like, I don't think anybody, I'm sure, I know the Iranians, the Russians, are very upset, but they probably, as soon as they heard it, said, oh, damn, it's Erdogan again. That's what he does.
Can you try bringing the mic just a little bit closer, Dad? For some reason, you're still a little quiet on my side.
All right. Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah, maybe it's on my end. But the fact that this happened, basically 24 hours after the ceasefire was reached, you don't think that Erdogan, Turkey did this really at the behest of Israel and the United States? Like, that this was pushed? It's hard for me to see Turkey's goal in destabilizing the region, just to take maybe a little bit of territory
Well, that's not... I don't think that's so much their goal, but yeah, he wants to take more territory. He wants to have greater influence. I think that's I mean, it's a very, very cruel calculation. Again, we've talked about the suffering of Syria. Um, it- but that's the kind of person he is. You know, this is something that if he can seize more territory, I think he does have kind of a vision of um, of restoring the Ottoman Empire. You know, that at one time Turkey was the center of a great empire, which was the Ottoman, and he'd like to get bits of that back.
Okay, so you think that it was relatively organic then from Turkey, that this is something that Erdogan wanted to do, that he's maybe been planning for a long
Yeah,
time,
yeah, he
that
must have
this
been planning. He's clearly very well organized. But again, you know, I think there's no question that he coordinated with, and he's had assistance from the U.S. above all, and probably Israel as well. Now, Israel looks at this as a great opportunity. Of course, they want weaker Syria is the better for them. So they're completely in favor of this. And they've even talked about, oh, we might need to move in, you know, if things get too chaotic in Syria, and, you know, we might have to move in from the Golan Heights. They may see an opportunity for them to go in and seize some territory too.
hmm, interesting.
Yeah. By the way, now that I mentioned Israel, remember, I mentioned that there was a report of pagers exploding in the hands of Syrian army officers.
Right.
That that was not confirmed, so I think we can safely assume that was a false report. But it doesn't
Okay.
change the fact that there is close coordination. There is a close, a, these fighters understand that they're on Israel's side. Again, they've made that clear in a lot of different ways.
It's just hard for me to imagine any Arab or Islamic country being on the side of Israel.
It is
Especially
hard, but
what's
it's
happened
true.
over the past
Right,
year. I mean,
right,
everybody's seen the just
right.
this horrific genocide or mass murder, however you want to frame it, of the Palestinians in Gaza and this
Yeah,
bombing of Lebanon. It's like, how could you support? I mean, Israel's lost the support of pretty much the whole world,
right,
but especially the Arab world, of course. And then you
right.
wonder,
Of
like, how
course.
can Arabs,
Yeah,
Turks, be supporting, maybe not directly, but have a common enemy with Israel and side with Israel in this conflict? It's hard for me to wrap my head around. So I
yeah.
just felt like there had to have been some type of coordination, influence, some deal cut with Erdogan. It's like, hey, Trump's going to be president. Is if you do this, then you'll get in good with Trump, and we'll
Yeah.
do that,
No, no,
or
that's
there's
not
something like,
impossible. I mean, I think that's certainly possible, but I don't think it would be sufficient to explain. It may have been an additional motivation. Again, there's clearly coordination, between the U.S. There has been in the past. The U.S. has been there in Syria training these soldiers, and it has to be emphasized that they're kitted out with all the most advanced weaponry, Western weaponry, and probably a lot of that is directly paid for with U.S. taxpayer dollars.
of
So yeah,
course.
I'm sure that's part of it. It's just like, um, I would be highly surprised if the U.S. was taken by surprise, so that they knew what was going on.
Should we view what's happening in Syria as its own thing, or should we really be taking a look at it as an extension of the conflict that's already been going on between Israel and the axis of resistance? But now
Yeah,
we have, it's great for Israel. It gets to take some pressure
yeah,
off of them right now. Now Hezbollah is distracted with the
right,
jihadist in
right. But
Syria.
well,
So
I believe they're sending soldiers there right now as we speak. They've had to divert soldiers because it's vital. Syria is vital to them. They understand that that's just it's not a secondary issue for them. It's primary.
so how should we look at this? Is this part of a greater conflict, or it's a new thing that is overlapping with the
Yeah.
Israeli
Okay,
versus
well,
axis of resistance
I would
conflict?
say, it's always been a part of it. That was the reason. Um, oh, well, initially, like I said, it was really the Sunni Shia conflict was a major part of it. So you had the Sunni powers rushing in, but then the U.S. immediately. And why did the U.S. get involved? And Israel, as we talked about, they provided direct support to Al Qaeda. Um, well, their motivations were different. Again, there's the Sunni Shia hostilities, which explains Saudi Arabia's original involvement. But of course, when you're talking about Israel and the U.S., it's really all about Israel. It's about weakening Hezbollah. They understand and cutting the link between Hezbollah and Iran. That's why they've been involved there all along, and why they're still involved there, and why they would support this. So it is certainly part. What happens in Syria has long been a part of the broader Middle East conflict, or broader, Israel axis of resistance conflict. There's no question about it. But then, there are also local players with their own motivations, and that's Erdogan. Yeah, he understands that there is this conflict going on, but he's just going to use it to his own advantage. That's just the way he is, right? He deals with everybody, with Russia, with Iran, and with the U.S. He's part of NATO. He wants to be part of BRICS, and he's you have to at least give it to him. He's a smart guy. He's very wily. He's also just thoroughly amoral, and he will, like right now, he's once again, reestablishing, let's say, the nightmare in Syria. He couldn't give a damn about the Syrian people. He's put Hezbollah and their support for Palestine at risk, but he doesn't give a damn about that. If he thinks he can get more territory, for whatever, I don't know what all of his objectives are here, but he just wants more. He wants to have a bigger part of what's going on in Syria.
Right. Is there a stated objective? Because the whole thing just seems very disconnected from everything. There's no, first of all, I don't even know what to call these people. Are they Al-Qaeda, jihadists, Free Syrian Army, rebels, ISIS? You see all these names being thrown around.
Right.
There's no clear leader. There's no clear stated objective. It's just something's happening, and all these different parties are involved. Turkey's here, we also hear about Ukraine, so training soldiers there. Right. So, first, what should we call these? What should I refer to these Syrian? Should I call them Syrian rebels? Should we call them?
They're definitely not
jihadists.
Do not call them rebels, and don't even call them Syrian, because the great majority of them, as far as I can tell, are not Syrians. Right,
they're Uyghurs and Turks
right, Tajiks and Uzbekis, and they're not Syrians. There are a few Syrians among them, but that's not so. They're definitely not rebels. So there are a foreign army funded and organized, funded by different groups, probably Qatar, Turkey, and the West as well, but largely organized and largely trained by Turkey.
So, all right, it's such a mess. So, okay, we got...
Yeah, it is. It is messy, and it's kind of hard. Sometimes it is hard to understand.
All right.
It may not even be entirely rational. It's just that this is somebody with lust of power, and in the end, hopefully it's going to be to his detriment that these, after the really terribly discouraging first few days, it sounds like the Syrian army is starting to get its act together, and then various other groups are coming in to help out, and from what I understand, they're beginning to push back this terrorist army, HTS. It's not just HTS, but that's the largest component. And HTS, remember, is Al-Qaeda.
So should we call them Al-Qaeda, this terrorist army, HTS? I mean,
you can call it, call them any of those would be a fair description.
All right. Well, I feel like we need to fix on one eventually, but just for sake of continuity. But just to kind of recap what's going on. So we got Uyghurs from China, Xinjiang province. You got Tajiks and Uzbeks out there in Central Asia. You got Turks, and they're being funded by the likes of Qatar and did you say Saudi Arabia?
No, not Saudi Arabia.
No, not Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia is not doing this anymore.
Okay,
they've actually expressed their support for Assad and condemned the invasion, which is a big difference from 2011.
Right.
So
okay.
So anyway, this is all very disturbing. It's very discouraging. But as some people have pointed out, actually, things have changed since then. I mean, it was actually a much more perilous situation back in 2011, because Syria had the whole Arab world against it. And Russia at that time was a lot weaker than it is now. America and Israel were a lot stronger. And so it was looking really bad. I mean, it was the intervention of Iran and Russia and help from Hezbollah that turned the tide. And they managed to do it. It took years to push them. It was an 8-year civil war. I guess Russia came in 2015, so like halfway through it, and helped to turn the tide. But this time, I mean, it's just like the Russian Air Force back then was much more primitive. They were relying on a lot of Soviet era MiGs. They still did good work, but now they have much more advanced Air Force and just much more advanced weaponry. And you can see some of that already. Like the Russians have been using their guided bombs, the ones that are the FABs, that they've used to such great effect in Ukraine, and they've been now using them against this terrorist army.
Okay, so what is motivating this terrorist army? What gets somebody all the way from Xinjiang, from Western China to, is it just the Qatari money that entices them, and then what, they come over to Turkey and get training, or they get training from the Ukrainians? Like, the whole thing is so weird, so messy.
Yeah, apparently Ukrainians have contributed, like some drone technology and maybe some EW.
Yeah, I saw a headline. Who knows? The headline was from Kiev Post. The Ukrainian media is all over, but it said something that that Ukrainian trained Syrian rebels.
Right. I imagine that their role was pretty minor, but yeah, I guess they're happy, wherever they can hurt the Russians or an ally of Russia. That's what they, apparently they've done the same thing in Africa. They've worked with terrorists.
Right, I've heard about that, right.
And then bragged about it. And then and then those African governments, said, well, forget you, and cut relations with them. And then, Ukraine said, well, we didn't really mean it. They'd already said it.
Right, that was
doing the same thing again. Yeah.
Dude, where was that in? Was that Sudan, Congo? I forget.
I think it was in the Sahel. In West Africa, there along the there's Burkina Faso, or one of those countries, maybe Niger. I can't remember which one it was exactly. Oh, no,
okay.
No, okay, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. I won't hold you to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to me, the whole thing I was thinking over the weekend that could this be like something that, who benefits from this I was thinking was really Ukraine and Israel, that they are in a bad way right now. They're desperate, and anything they can do to widen the conflict is in their benefit, because there's no way out for them unless they can really draw in the United States and NATO, and maybe they're just hoping for an all-out global clash. Tens of millions of people die, but maybe we come out on top and I survive, and I can be the ruler of this new destroyed world. Because if Ukraine can expand this conflict here, Russia's there. Now Russia's having to divert some resources to Syria. The United States are there. They might just be thinking like, let's just keep on throwing bombs, firecrackers around until something explodes. Same thing with Israel. It's like, great, things weren't going well in southern Lebanon. They had this Iranian threat that's just sitting there waiting for them constantly. They're not doing well in Gaza despite the amount of civilians they've killed and infrastructure they destroyed. It's just been a mess, and they've completely lost the PR war. So both of these countries, Ukraine and Israel, I think these are existential conflicts for them, and they're going to lose them unless something major happens. And I was just thinking, are they making that calculation? Just like, okay, great, we can't win in Ukraine, we can't win in Lebanon, let's just blow up Syria and hopefully draw things in, distract it? Or is that kind of crazy thinking? Is that?
I would say, their calculations are simpler. I don't think they're thinking World War III or general chaos, but they do have defined, limited objectives. Both of them do. And for Israel, it's obvious, and it's a very important objective. They benefit greatly from chaos in Syria. It's not so much that, again, that it's simply because chaos in Syria means reduced support for Hezbollah. and that's, I think that's their calculation. That's it. But to them, it's a very important calculation, and so they are strongly supportive of this. And now on Ukraine's side, it's more just sort of like spite, because I don't. Yeah, it's just like wherever the Russians are, we'll be there on the other side, and maybe we can kill a Russian or two. In the end, I think it'll make virtually no difference. That again, Russia is so much stronger than it was before. It has the extra resources to divert without affecting its efforts in Ukraine. I don't think it'll make a bit of difference. Maybe the Ukrainians are just hoping that somehow it will, but I think it's like so much of what we see the Ukrainians do. It just seems to be spite. It's just like, if we can kill Russians somewhere, we'll do it. We'll send a drone in and hit the civilian car or whatever. Again, it does absolutely nothing to strengthen their own position or increase their chances of victory. Yeah, not at all. But they killed some Russians, and that's what they want to do.
Yeah, the kind of what I'm learning as we follow these conflicts is that it's so hard to predict the future. Things just come out of left field all the time. Because what I never had on my bingo card was Qatari and Turkish funded Tajiks and Uyghurs from China and Uzbek entering the conflict in Syria. Like this just came out of nowhere for me, and I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. So where do you think this is going? I mean, I imagine with Russia there, the Syrian army, Iran is backing Hezbollah and the Syrian army as well. I don't know if they're going to be sending troops there. I imagine
Also,
that
right, there have been some of the Iran-aligned militias in Iraq have actually already crossed the border into Syria to provide support.
So I imagine this terrorist army isn't going to last long then with all these.
I certainly hope not.
And
Yeah,
and
I
then
think it's hard to say. That's one thing I've learned is like never make firm predictions about a timeline or anything. But again, it's just like we said, like I was saying earlier, Syria's position was actually much more precarious several years ago during the civil war. They were much weaker, and the forces arrayed against them were much stronger. That's the main thing. And now some of those forces have pulled out, very important ones like Saudi Arabia, and now actually support the Assad government. And then their main allies, you'd have to say that it's definitely Russia is stronger, militarily much stronger than it was in 2015. And Iran is stronger too. So I think in the definitely like it's in the medium to long term, it's going to look good. The short term, it may take a while for them to, kind of to organize their forces, but it looks like already they're having some success, at least on one front, and hopefully that will continue. I think they really do need. The faster they move now, the better, because you know how it is when you give an army an opportunity to dig in, then it becomes very, very hard to
root them
push
out.
them out. But if they haven't had that opportunity, the terrorist army, they're in Aleppo, but they haven't been able to dig in. So if they can get back into Aleppo quickly, then I think we have reason to hope that this will be resolved relatively quickly.
Then what would that mean for Turkey if Turkey was really the one behind most of this? I mean, isn't that going to look terrible for Turkey? I mean, Erdogan's
Yeah,
going to
it
have egg
could.
on his face. I
Right.
mean, especially think about relationships with Russia. I mean, just the
Yeah,
fact that Russia's there, it's like, what is Erdogan thinking? It's like
I know.
you
But
know
he's
you're not
kind
going to
of,
overthrow Assad.
yeah. Well, think about the things that Turkey has done to Russia in the past. Of course, it wasn't too long ago. What was it, 2 years ago, um, that Turkey turned over those Azov terrorists that they had promised to keep until the end of the war and actually free them to Ukraine as part of it, trying to get in the good graces, basically, of the other NATO countries. I think that's what he was doing. So that was a real betrayal. That was a stab in the back. And then if we go back, I'm not quite sure exactly when it was. Maybe it was 2016, something like that. Um, the Turks actually shot down a Russian plane and killed a Russian pilot. And I remember Russia was furious at that time. And Erdogan had to do some, make profuse apologies and grovel, and I'm sure there was more than that, to set things right. But he has done things like that, in the past. This is, you'd have to say it's even on a larger scale, but this is something that he does, and he'll survive. It's clear that a lot of his plans go awry, and hopefully this one will too.
Do you think this conflict, what's happening in Syria, is this just a sideshow, or do you think this is going to have a real large impact on the larger, Israel versus the axis of resistance, or even potentially Ukraine and Russia? Or do you
Right.
think that this is
Well,
just a little blip?
yeah. If it's resolved quickly in the Syrian government's favor, then we would say it was a little sideshow, it was a diversion, and it didn't last. If it goes badly, and Assad's government is really threatened, it could be something very major that will have a large impact on the overall conflict in the Middle East. Then potentially, especially if the chaos spreads, Israel might move in and take some territory itself, and then again, Hezbollah will be its supply chain will be severely threatened, and Hezbollah itself will have to divert more and more soldiers, to the conflict, and so it'll be a reduced force within Lebanon.
Has Turkey taken any credit or responsibility
No,
of what's
no,
going on?
no.
They're just kind of like,
Yeah,
oh,
they're
this just
pretending like,
happened.
yeah, who know? Oh, we're surprised. Yeah, they haven't, and it's kind of funny. It's just like with uh, um, the Russians and the Iranians, they know what's happened, and you have to know that you have to be sure that they're furious, but publicly, maybe they just know, okay, this is how you deal with Erdogan. Okay, you gotta go in there and start punching back hard, start killing his soldiers. Okay, but then we'll maintain this facade that's important to him, and make it clear, like, privately, you're not going to do this, Erdogan. We're pushing you back. Whatever. I'm sure I don't know all the things that they're telling him.
Hmm. Oh man, the world's so complicated, Dad.
Yeah.
I mean, my
Well, yeah, it is. I mean, the Syria conflict, there's times when it's got really complicated. I mean, the U.S. was involved through different agencies. Like the CIA had its own little private army, and the Pentagon had its own little private army. And at one point, the CIA's army was fighting the Pentagon's army within Syria. That tells you how crazy it got.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm still struggling to process and understand
Yeah.
what's
Well,
happening
yeah,
there, but
and,
it's
I don't
just
know if anybody fully understands it, but because you can only, who knows everything that's going on. What we're doing, we're making our best guess based on prior history, and the few solid facts that we have.
yeah. Okay. All right. Is there anything else you want to talk about the Middle East that was pressing? What about the ceasefire deal? Has it been broken? I've been seeing some just
Yeah, well,
rockets and
right. I
bombings.
think I heard in the first 3 days or so that there were 52 violations by Israel. Um, and they have been violating it regularly. But it's still like the bombing has gone way down. By and large, the southern invasion has ended, and they're withdrawing. So they're violating it left and right. But it's still holding. Who knows how long it will hold.
Well, it doesn't sound like it's really
Well,
holding.
well,
There's
yeah.
50
Well, I mean, compared to what you had before, you have to say that things are just much quieter. Yeah,
Hmm.
instead of dropping, I don't know, 5,000 bombs in a day, they're dropping 10 or something.
Were there ever that many bombs
I don't,
that they would drop?
I don't know. I just threw that out there. Who knows? 1,000 bombs in a day. Well, that one attack on Nasrallah, what would they say? Just for that one apartment complex, it was 80 something 2,000-pound bombs.
82,000 pound bombs?
Yes.
Dang. Wow, that's crazy. I mean, I'm actually surprised because I felt like one 2,000 pound bomb would do that much damage, but it seems like these bombs, I mean, obviously they're quite destructive, but you drop a lot of them to blow up a building. Apparently, it's not
Yeah.
just.
Well, apparently, in this case, of course, they wanted to get them underground, and um, but the first bombs were to actually just completely flatten the complex because and just so that there was just a pile of rubble, and then the next bombs would penetrate through the rubble and to get to the underground offices.
Okay. All right. Well, the Middle East is taking a turn that I didn't expect it to take. I was
Yeah,
expecting
I certainly wasn't expecting it. Now, again, you have to. Some people did see it coming, like the Armenian who grew up in Aleppo, Kavor
Kavork.
Galasian. Yeah, no, he saw it coming, and yeah, a month ago he was ringing the alarm bell. So not just him, but some other people. So this, you have to say that this was, if nothing else, a major intelligence failure on the part of the Syrian army. I don't know how much the Russians were involved in intelligence, but maybe the Russians as well. This area was very lightly defended, and they obviously weren't ready for what happened.
Okay. All right. Well, let's pivot over to Russia, Ukraine. So let's start with what happened to Putin's promised retaliation, because on our last talk, and I heard this from other people, other guests as well. People were saying that, the airspace was closed down September 30th. Another Oreshnik missile's coming. I put out a video saying in 24 hours, new Oreshnik going to hit Ukraine command centers. I was telling my friends, watch out, these things are about to happen. And then I was on pins and needles for most of the weekend, and there was nothing. It was quiet. It was quiet. No major developments. I felt like in the Russian-Ukrainian front.
Yeah, well, I have to say maybe it was classic Putin. Yeah, it was. I think it was maybe on the day that we did our last podcast that Putin had a press conference, and he said that they were definitely going to retaliate against the most recent attack and strikes. And then he talked about and that they were going to use the Oreshkin. Yeah. First within Ukraine and possibly against decision-making centers. And so it seemed like it's certainly, let's say, it was strongly suggestive that he was going to retaliate with the Oreshkin missile. Um, um, Retaliate against the recent attack and strikes. And it was going to, and from the way he was talking, it sounded like it was going to be soon. And then there was this additional information about the airspace. I mistakenly said it was in Kazakhstan. Some of the viewers pointed out, and clearly, actually, that was never possible. Kazakhstan has very friendly relations with Russia, but they don't want to be a party to the conflict, and they would be if the missile was launched from there. But it was over the airspace where the missile would be launched from, and it was for a period of 3 days, ending on the 30th. Now, some people have since said that happens fairly often. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this new hypersonic missile, and so that was kind of a false alarm. What I think happened is this. Okay, the next day, okay, he had Putin had another press conference, and he announced that they had retaliated. It was that last night's missile strike, 90 missiles fired into Ukraine. That was his retaliation. Then he went on to talk about how, again, he would be using his Oreshkin missile in the future and might hit decision-making centers. So that's still on the table. That's something he seems to intend to do or is threatening to do. But he said that the recent the retaliation to the recent ATACMS strikes had already been carried out. Now, say, my first reaction is like, well, what was that? I mean, because the Russians, if who's been following the conflict knows, they've been striking Ukraine virtually every night over the last week or two, right? And probably at least the last couple of weeks, every night, every other night, there have been major strikes. So this is essentially nothing, right? Essentially, he did not retaliate. That would be your, the first reaction. Now, Alexander Mercouris, did an analysis of the strike, and he pointed out that there were some things exceptional about it. One was that the Ministry of Defense claimed to have have hit and destroyed 5 launchers. These are HIMARS launchers, which are used to fire ATACMS missiles. And these launchers were in the Sumy region, which is very, very close to Bryansk and Kursk. So they would be the launchers that would be used for these strikes, and probably had been used for the strikes. And then also there were, I think that in those strikes on the launchers, the Russians claimed that they could kill personnel, the crews, including foreign personnel. And then there was a strike it was a GUR, which is military intelligence in Ukraine, a GUR headquarters, or at least a meeting place, and that a large number of foreigners were killed. They said 40, a majority of whom were Americans. And then I think there was another one where a number of French military personnel were killed. So what Alexander Mercouris argues is that, okay, yeah, they especially targeted the launchers and the foreign military personnel. And so it was a retaliation. Indeed, it was a retaliation for the ATACMS. Now, I think he's right to point this out, but I disagree with his reasoning. I don't find it plausible that they had actually ignored ATACMS, or these, HIMARS launchers that are used for the ATACMS missiles, that they had ignored them previously and then decided to go after them. I think that's not possible. Those were always highly sought after targets, and they were probably searching for them all the time. I think what happened is they got lucky, and they got them, and that is a direct blow to to their efforts, degraded their capabilities. To fire one ATACMS missile, you need one launcher. I think these launchers can fire something like 8 HIMARS at a time, but they can only fire one ATACMS. So you take out 5, you seriously degraded in that region. You seriously degraded NATO's capability to fire, into Russia. So that is, that could be, I think there's no way that they just decided to go after it there, but they got lucky and they got him that night. And then as far as the military personnel, well, it's not the first time that the Russians have killed NATO personnel within Ukraine. In fact, if you remember, I think it was roughly a year ago that 60 French, so-called mercenaries were killed in a strike. And
Right.
remember,
In a hotel or something, right?
yeah, right.
Right.
And so it's happened as many times, So again, I don't think there's really any evidence that they specifically decided to go after these people, that night in retaliation, but they got them. So it's just like Putin got the report, and and when he saw it, he said, "Hey, I can use this. Let's see, we can just delay our hypersonic attack. We don't need to do this. This works. This actually, we really hurt him last night, and we can just call this a retaliation." And I think that would be classic Putin, like I was saying. He has a chance to reduce the escalation. It is, you could say it is an escalation of some kind. You could call it that. He'll take it. And, it may have worked. The thing is that we have, for example, there was silence on the NATO side about this attack, which tells me it was successful, and what the Russians are saying is correct. If they were making false claims, there would have been strong denials on the other side. But it's just like, oh man, they got us. That hurt. Those are some pretty high level guys there. Our guys are scared of going over there now. And hey, they took out those launchers. We can't even fire anything for a while. We got to get some more launchers up there, and that's not going to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
So it may have really succeeded. It was just that he got he got an unusually good haul, you could say, that night with that strike. And he said he just took it and said that, okay, this is it.
Interesting.
So that's my theory. I think it makes sense.
Okay. Dad, when you be careful when you're tapping the desk, because it's picking up a lot of the thumping next to the mic, so don't tap too much. So you think that he just got lucky, Putin got lucky, and that if they didn't take out these HIMARS launchers, then an Oreshnik would have been used, that he just saw this as an opportunity, like, okay, we don't have to make a big show, this gives a chance for actually, NATO, the West, to say, let's don't talk about what happened with this regular missile strike. You can't hide when an Oreshnik is used. That's going to make headlines. But, okay, this is just other missile strike. We won't say anything about, 40 foreign military personnel, mostly Americans, getting killed and these HIMARS launches being destroyed. We just won't say anything. And so Putin gets to take the win. NATO gets to just say nothing happened, everything's fine, and not escalate further. So it's a way to that Russia did a lot of damage, and hopefully not in a large escalation step. Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you didn't, you think that there would have been a Russian use if they didn't have a good successful attack?
Yeah, I think there's a good chance of it. Maybe it would have gone off on schedule as not everybody, but many of us were expecting.
Mm-hmm. So who
Yes,
are
I
these?
think he felt it was clear. He had made it clear that we are going to retaliate against this. And I, when Putin says that, he means it. And then when he got this, an exceptionally good results in that missile strike that night, he said, "Hey, this works. Let's just use it."
Interesting. So who do you think these American military personnel were killed? You said up to 40, and you said mostly Americans.
That's what the Russian Ministry of Defense said. Yeah.
So how do we keep that quiet here in America? When an American gets killed overseas, we go crazy. We just say one drop of American blood will spill a gallon of yours is always what we say. So who are these people that are there? We're not saying it because they're not supposed to be there.
Right,
and so,
exactly. It's just that I think there's some reasonable fear within the U.S. government about exposing, because they're not supposed to be there, or something that they haven't been telling their people about, and they know that this is not popular. Again, there is virtually zero support for boots on the ground in Ukraine. The Americans don't want it. The Western Europeans don't want it. But their governments are sending people. Okay, they're not in very large numbers. A lot of them are not in uniform. Some of them are. So it's just something that they see in their interest to play down. They know it could draw unwanted attention. Within the U.S. to what they're doing in Ukraine, and it would probably and most certainly decrease support for the Ukraine effort.
So who are these people then? Are they intelligence officers? Are they people that are training Ukrainian troops? What is their role? Do you know the role of these?
Yeah, there's no question. There's quite a bit of cooperation between the intelligence agencies. We know that began like the day after the Maidan coup in 2014. Remember, there was actually a story that came out of the New York Times a couple of years ago about all the different CIA bases that were established within.
Right. Wasn't it 13 CIA bases, I think?
Yeah, something like that. That's right. Yeah. So there's very extensive cooperation between the intelligence agencies. So there have to be a lot of intelligence agents, within U.S. Western intelligence within Ukraine, no question about it. And they've been training them. So there are trainers, there are technicians. Again, we know they need the technicians to operate a lot of these advanced systems. They're all there, and there are commanders. I mean, there was a Polish general that was killed. It was believed actually Chasov Yar. Again, it was probably about a year ago or so. And then what happens invariably in these cases is that some weeks later, the obituary appears somewhere in the U.S. or Poland or France, and it says, this person died in an auto accident, or he died of a disease or something like that. I mean,
really?
They just give it a cover story and then quietly bury the guy.
Can they do that for all these people? I mean, there was that strike that we said killed what was like 60 French mercenaries. Here we have relatively high level people.
The French actually, admitted that they were their citizens. They called them like aid workers or something like that, and clearly they weren't. Actually, you can see like from the photos after the strike that it was clearly a very large gathering of military personnel. But they admitted, that there were French there. They just pretended that they had nothing to do with military operations.
How do
But
you?
you do. But I think even very recently, maybe it was a Canadian citizen. It was said that he died. He got sick or something in Ukraine and came back, and everybody suspects that no, that's not what happened. He probably was
Yeah,
killed.
I'm just wondering how a country can keep this hidden. I mean, these people that have died, they all have family back in the
Yeah,
U.S. or wherever. They know their son or their brother, what they're
yeah.
doing there is not, they're not handing out cookies like Victoria Nuland.
Uh-huh.
They know that they're part of this war, and I'm sure they have to be very upset. They were probably told that we're just there's not no risk. We're just playing an aid position to for the Ukrainian army, and if more Americans start coming home in body bags, surely people will talk, right? And
Yeah.
then
Yeah, there's
a
obviously a
break.
point beyond which you can't cover it up. And I'm sure people talk, but the question is, does the local media pick it up? And they kind of know they're not supposed to do that, and they just don't. They don't touch it. So it can, yeah, you can keep it quiet up to a point. There's a point beyond which you can't.
So
There's
you don't.
always,
So when something like this happens, you don't view it as a major escalation. That this is not something that the U.S. will necessarily escalate against,
yeah.
right?
Well, no, I mean, the fact that they're not saying anything kind of tells you that they just accepted it. If they wanted to play it up and said, the Russians have attacked our people there, and we need to do something in response. They could have taken that course, but they didn't. They chose to keep it quiet, and that suggests to me is that they said, "Oh, damn, okay, yeah, this he can really hurt us. Let's pull back for a while and rethink this." I
Right.
hope that's
So
what's happening. So far nothing's happened since then. There haven't been any strikes, but of course it's only been a few days.
right. I was about to say it sounds like maybe things are quieting down. Maybe the message is getting through to the U.S. or maybe the Russia taking out those HIMARS systems was devastating enough where they realized like we just don't have enough ATACMS. Maybe we can't keep on doing this because really it was the first week after the announcement that they're going to lift these restrictions for long range missile strikes that we saw a little flurry of ATACMS and Storm Shadows, and then the Oreshnik, and now this. But it seems to be quieting down. Do you think the message has gotten through, or that we're going to see continued strikes from Ukraine using ATACMS, Storm Shadows, and Scalps, and then we will see Putin next time use an Oreshnik, or something bigger, and strike in NATO potentially even. I mean,
Um, well, there was, according to Gilbert Doctorow, one of the leading shows that is close to the Kremlin. So a lot of the things that are reported there kind of reflect what Kremlin thinking. Said, I think shortly after that strike, that the West got the message, and I don't know on what basis, but maybe there was even a back channel communication. It's like from the U.S. saying, okay, yeah, we're going to cool it. We got the message. We'll see. Who knows? But they maybe got the message for a while. But there's always those people in the State Department, and that are going to always be pushing for escalation. And we've seen them win in the past. They may very well win again, and the escalation will continue. And then we'll see again. Putin's made it clear that it will be he will use the Oreshnik. He's not going to. Uh, he's made it quite clear in that he may use it against decision-making centers.
is there anything else happening in the Ukraine-Russian conflict that you'd like to talk about, go over? Any big
Uh,
pressing news updates?
no, I can't think of anything at the moment. It's things
Okay.
continue as they had. The Russians are still advancing, rather quickly in southern Donbass.
Oh, okay. I had one other question. So I think I saw Zelensky is changing his tune a little bit. He mentioned that he is willing to give up territory, and to end this conflict now, but with the guarantee that the Ukraine can join NATO, the remaining parts. Is this? Do you think this is significant in any way? That this is a sign that Zelensky is realizing we need to talk? I mean, this whole NATO thing is silly though, because that's obviously the whole reason this,
Right.
one of the main reasons this whole conflict started. So that's end of negotiations for Russia. Obviously,
Right.
they're not going to allow that to happen.
Right.
But is it a good sign that
I don't think so. I don't think he's really changed his tune in a significant way. I mean, if you look carefully at what he says, it's not that, okay, we're going to concede these territories to Russia. It's like temporarily, maybe we'll stop the shooting for a while if that's what we need to get our membership in NATO. But he's talking about like instant membership in NATO. And then the day after, you could continue the shooting. I mean, and then all of a sudden, he would be a NATO member and Article 5 could be invoked. So I don't think he's making any real concessions. And he still claims that they have to, that the only settlement that Ukraine could ever accept would be for Russia to return all the territories, including Crimea. That hasn't changed. So yeah, I wouldn't make very much of it.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask you one last thing. We'll pivot over to something Trump said. So Trump, I'm sure you've seen this, has threatened the BRICS countries with 100% tariffs if they try to move away from the dollar and make their own currency. I'll read his tweet so everybody can hear it. Is the idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require a commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any other currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can find another sucker. There's no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America. So what do you make of that?
Yeah, well, it's classic Trump. Yeah, a lot of bluster. And, well, first of all, the BRICS already made it clear that they have, at the present time, they have no intention of creating a BRICS currency. They are working on and making apparently some real progress on these alternative payment systems, which involves quite a bit. You think it would be simple, but there's a whole infrastructure, and they're working on that infrastructure. And I'm sure that'll just go ahead. But there wasn't any concrete plans to create this a BRICS currency. But at the same time, too, it's just I think a lot of countries that hear that are going to be further convinced of the need to join BRICS and to become a part of it. Because you just say, well, yeah, this is the problem. It's just that the U.S. is always looking to weaponize the dollar. It's looking to punish people or countries that don't toe its line. We're sick of this. We want to have alternatives. And I think that he probably just contributed to that perception.
Right. That was my immediate reaction when I saw that. It's like, well, this is clearly why people need an alternative, is that the U.S. says, if you don't do what we say, then we're going to punish you. And clearly that's, and I just don't understand how people Trump or, our leaders can't realize that that's the problem. The weaponization of the dollar is the problem. We can't be doing this. We have to allow the dollar to be used fairly, when we can't be sanctioning everybody and punishing everybody, slapping all these tariffs. It's just further fueling the decline of the United States. And the idea that that's the big threat, is you can't sell to America. It's like, it's going to hurt America more than anything else. You want to slap 100% tariffs on all Chinese goods? Talk about inflation. Things are going to go out through the roof here in the United States. It's shooting ourselves in the foot. I just don't understand why it's so difficult for people to grasp that, or for someone like Trump to grasp that, or his team. Surely they understand the implications of what's happening in the world, why BRICS is created, why the multipolar world is lucrative, why people are wanting an alternative payment system, because of what we've done we've sanctioned 1/3 of the countries in the world. You can't just do that forever and expect there to be no repercussions. Right. And at the same time, we're just printing off money, devaluing the dollar and forcing everybody to use it, and then we go into debt and start all these wars around the world and expect everybody just to go along with it.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Well, it's just part of the same mindset, that we wondered, like, we try to understand the NATO's conduct vis-a-vis Russia and with respect to Ukraine. And again, we say it's irrational, but it's always a case of the West overestimating its own strength and underestimating the strength of the opposition. And it's part of that, we've just explained it as sort of like this imperial hubris. It's this unipolar moment that they just can't let go of. I think Mark Sloboda described it as kind of like a high that they had, and they're just trying to hang on to that high. And yeah, it ends up really distorting their understanding of the world. They in everything that they talk about, like, again, there's all this talk about, well, we're going to go in and we're going to basically impose some kind of ceasefire in Ukraine. We're going to threaten the Russians and we're going to twist the Ukrainian arms and they'll agree to it. And they just don't seem to understand that they don't have that strength. I mean, that Russia is in the driver's seat, but they really believe that they can just impose something. And it's the same thing with the dollar. It's just like there was a time when they could just do whatever, say whatever, do whatever they wanted, and they would threaten sanctions and countries would just they would fall into line. But those days are over. They just don't seem to understand it. They're still living in those days, and those days have ended. And that's really very much to their own detriment.
Okay, well, let's end it there, Dad.
Okay.
Okay, have a good rest of your day.